What if I told you that a single law from 1792 determined how every dollar you earn today loses its value? Welcome to Timeless Finance. Today, I'm inviting you to explore the Coinage Act of 1792 and how it shaped the destiny of American money. But first, I have a quick question for you. Comment down below and tell me what country you are in and what time is it for you right now. I am really interested in seeing just how global our community is. Now, let us get into it. In 1792, the United States Congress passed a law that would quietly shape the next 2 centuries of global finance. It was called the Coinage Act of 1792. On the surface, it looked simple. A law to create a national mint, define the value of coins, and give a young republic its own money. But beneath the surface, this act was far more than a bureaucratic measure. It was the founding blueprint for American money, a system built on silver, gold, and trust. Yet over time, the core principles of this act were forgotten, twisted, or deliberately erased. What began as a promise of honest money turned into a machine of credit, inflation, and manipulation. Picture the scene. Philadelphia, 1792. The nation was barely a decade old. George Washington sat as the first president, and Alexander Hamilton, the brilliant, controversial Treasury Secretary, had a vision. He believed that for the United States to thrive, it needed independence not just in politics, but in money. At that time, America had no official currency. People used a chaotic mix of Spanish pesos, British pounds, Dutch guilders, and privately issued notes. Trust in paper was low because the continental dollar used during the Revolution had already collapsed. Not worth a continental was a phrase that literally came from that disaster. So Hamilton proposed a fix, a national system based on real metal, gold, and silver. The Coinage Act established the United States Mint and declared that the dollar would be the unit of account. But what is fascinating is how it defined that dollar. It was not just a name. It was a precise weight of silver, 371.25 grains, or about 24 grams of pure silver. The law also defined gold coins, fixing the ratio between gold and silver at 15:1. This bimetallic system was intended to balance the economy between scarcity and flexibility. And here's where it gets interesting. The act made counterfeiting or debasing the money supply punishable by death. That is right. In 1792, if you knowingly manipulated the money, you could be executed. That one clause tells you how seriously the founders viewed monetary honesty. To them, debasing the currency was not a technical issue. It was moral theft, stealing from every person who held the dollar. Hamilton designed the mint meticulously. Every coin was supposed to remind citizens that money in America came from law, labor, and liberty, not from kings or private bankers. One side bore the word liberty, an image symbolizing freedom. The other side displayed an eagle, the emblem of the new republic. For decades, that system worked remarkably well. The dollar gained a reputation as one of the most honest currencies in the world. But as the country grew richer and more complex, that founding ideal started to erode. In 1834, Congress changed the gold to silver ratio, and overnight, silver coins began to vanish from circulation. The United States effectively slipped from a bimetallic standard to a de facto gold standard. When the Civil War erupted in 1861, the illusion of monetary stability collapsed entirely. The government issued paper money, the infamous greenbacks. For the first time since 1792, American money was not backed by metal. Inflation soared. Prices doubled in some cities. The very moral line that the Coinage Act had tried to draw was crossed. In 1873, Congress made a fateful decision, one that would later be known as the Crime of 73. Without much public debate, it quietly demonetized silver. The dollar was now officially tied only to gold. Farmers were crushed under the weight of debts that became harder to pay back. The late 19th century became an era of intense populist anger over money. The famous Cross of Gold speech by William Jennings Bryan in 1896 captured the rage perfectly. "You shall not crucify mankind upon a cross of gold." It was a moral echo of 1792, a cry for a return to monetary justice. By 1900, the United States officially confirmed gold as the sole basis for its money. Then, in 1913, the Federal Reserve was created. Money was no longer a fixed measure of value. It became a tool of policy, adjustable, expandable, and political. The ideals of the Coinage Act, that money should be stable, measurable, and moral, were buried under the weight of modern finance. The Great Depression put this new system to the test. When the stock market crashed in 1929, people hoarded gold because it was the only form of money they trusted. In 1933, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt made a shocking move. He ordered all citizens to turn in their gold coins and certificates to the government in exchange for paper dollars. Private ownership of gold was now illegal. The Coinage Act of 1792 had declared death the punishment for debasing money. In 1933, the government redefined what money was. Gold coins that had circulated for over a century were withdrawn. The official price of gold was raised from $20.67 to $35 per ounce, effectively devaluing the dollar overnight. After World War II, the 1944 Bretton Woods Agreement cemented the dollar AS dominance by tying it to gold and making other currencies dependent on it. But beneath this confidence lay a contradiction. The supply of promises was growing faster than the supply of gold to back them. By the late 1960s, the United States was bleeding gold reserves. Then came 1971, the year that buried the last remnant of the Coinage Act's vision. President Richard Nixon announced that the United States would temporarily suspend the dollar's convertibility into gold. It was supposed to be a short-term emergency measure. Instead, it became permanent. The dollar became a pure fiat currency, money backed by nothing but trust and government decree. With a single announcement, nearly 180 years of American monetary tradition were erased. The foundation of the Coinage Act, that a dollar was defined by weight, purity, and honesty, had been inverted. What is left today is a system Hamilton would barely recognize. The modern dollar is just a promise, backed not by metal, but by faith in government and the Federal Reserve. It is a currency that can be created with a few keystrokes. A dollar defined as 24 grams of silver would today be worth around 20 to 25 real-world dollars. In other words, the currency has lost over 95% of its purchasing power since the founding era. The founders feared inflation more than taxation. They saw the debasement of money as a form of theft, subtle, silent, and devastating. For over a century, the gold and silver standard restrained power. Politicians could not spend recklessly because they could not print gold. But the 20th century replaced that accountability with flexibility. When the Federal Reserve expands its balance sheet or governments run trillion-dollar deficits, the first recipients of new money gain the most. By the time that money trickles down to workers and savers, inflation has already eaten into their purchasing power. Now, we live in a world where money exists mostly as numbers on screens. Central banks are developing digital currencies that could replace cash entirely. In such a system, every transaction could be monitored, approved, or denied. The oldest idea in economic liberty, that your money is your property, could vanish with a software update. This is why the forgotten lessons of the Coinage Act still matter. Money is not neutral. It shapes behavior, incentives, and power structures. When individuals control money, they are free. When institutions control money, individuals serve those institutions. Nations that once mocked gold as obsolete are quietly buying tons of it. Cryptocurrencies represent a grassroots demand for monetary independence. Ordinary people, squeezed by inflation, are asking fundamental questions. What gives money its value? Who benefits from its creation? The truth is that monetary systems rarely collapse because people lose faith in numbers. They collapse because people lose faith in fairness. Power, once unrestrained, always expands until it breaks the system that sustains it. That is the real warning hidden in the Coinage Act. Every empire that has tried to redefine value without consequence has learned the same lesson. Rome diluted its silver. France printed its assignats. Weimar Germany ran its presses. Each believed it could control outcomes with clever policy. Each collapsed when trust evaporated. The next chapter of money is being written right now in the policies of central banks, in the architecture of digital currencies, and in the decisions of people like you. The principles of 1792 still whisper across the centuries. Money must be real, measurable, and honest. Otherwise, it will become a weapon. The founders knew that once money serves politics instead of the people, collapse is inevitable. And maybe that is the most uncomfortable truth of all. The failure of modern money will not come from technology or economics. It will come from forgetting what the founders already knew. Now, I would love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below. Do you agree with this? What is your take on the Coinage Act and modern money? Your perspective really matters to us and helps shape the future of this channel.